The moment Jake Wilson stepped forward to help a choking stranger, he had no idea how dramatically his life would change. What happened next would leave him questioning everything he thought he knew about fate, kindness, and second chances. Stay with me until the end to discover how a single act of courage connected two broken souls and transformed not just their lives, but an entire community. If you're touched by this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that remind us how unexpected moments can change everything. Jake Wilson's hands trembled as he fumbled with his tie, the silky fabric slipping through his calloused fingers. At 42, he still hadn't mastered the simple task, something his late wife Maria used to tease him about. 3 years since cancer took her, and he still found himself turning to ask for her help with the smallest things. "Dad, we're going to be late." Emma called from downstairs, her teenage impatience evident in every syllable. "Coming, sweetheart," Jake replied, giving up on the tie and stuffing it into his pocket. Tonight was Emma's 16th birthday dinner, and he'd promised to take her somewhere special, a promise he intended to keep despite the construction company's latest financial troubles. The Ocean View restaurant was far beyond Jake's budget, but Emma had been dropping hints for months. Her eyes lit up when they entered the elegant dining room with its panoramic views of the Pacific. For a moment, Jake forgot about the second mortgage on their modest home and the stack of unpaid medical bills from Maria's final months. "This is perfect, Dad," Emma whispered, squeezing his hand. In that moment, the financial sacrifice seemed worth it. They were halfway through their meal when Jake noticed the woman at the next table. She was dining alone, elegant in a simple black dress, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. There was something in her eyes, a familiar sadness that Jake recognized all too well. The look of someone trying to navigate the world with a piece of themselves missing. Emma noticed him staring and kicked him under the table. "Dad, stop being weird," she hissed. Jake felt his face flush. "I wasn't," he began, but his words were cut short by a strange sound from the neighboring table. The woman was clutching her throat, her face rapidly turning red. A waiter rushed over, but froze in panic. Without thinking, Jake leapt from his chair. "She's choking," he announced, moving behind the woman. "I'm going to help you," he said calmly, positioning his hands for the Heimlich maneuver, a technique he'd learned during a first aid course at the construction site. It took 3 forceful thrusts before the obstruction dislodged. The woman gasped for air, color slowly returning to her face. The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes on them. "Thank you," she whispered when she could finally speak, tears welling in her eyes. "I was dining alone and I thought this might be it." Jake awkwardly patted her shoulder. Anyone would have done the same. But as the restaurant manager rushed over and the moment passed, Jake noticed Emma watching him with an expression he hadn't seen in years, pure pride. The woman introduced herself as Claire Bennett. She insisted on paying for their meal despite Jake's protests, and they exchanged phone numbers at Emma's insistence. "Just in case you need anything," Jake had said awkwardly, not expecting to hear from her again. Life returned to normal. Jake continued struggling with his small construction company, trying to secure enough contracts to keep his 5 employees paid. Emma focused on school and her photography hobby, a passion that reminded Jake so much of Maria that it sometimes hurt to watch her with a camera. 3 days after the restaurant incident, Jake was reviewing estimates in his cramped home office when Emma called from downstairs. "Dad! There's someone here for you." Jake frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Making his way downstairs, he found Emma at the door, speaking with a tall man in an impeccable suit. "Mr. Wilson," the man asked, his posture rigid and professional. "My name is Robert. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Alexander Hayes. If you have a moment, he would like to speak with you." Jake stared blankly. "Alexander Hayes? The real estate developer?" Robert nodded, gesturing toward a sleek black car parked in the driveway. Through the tinted windows, Jake could make out the silhouette of someone in the back seat. Dad, that's like the richest guy in California, Emma whispered excitedly. With a mixture of confusion and curiosity, Jake followed Robert to the car. As the door opened, he found himself face to face with Alexander Hayes, billionaire, philanthropist, and one of the most powerful men on the West Coast. Mr. Wilson, Hayes said, extending his hand. Please, join me. Inside the luxurious vehicle, Hayes studied Jake with intense blue eyes. I understand you helped a woman at Ocean View restaurant a few nights ago. Jake shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't a big deal. It was to me, Hayes replied quietly. Claire Bennett is my sister. The revelation hit Jake like a physical force. Claire had mentioned nothing about being related to one of the wealthiest men in the country. She told me what happened, Hayes continued. What she didn't tell you is that she's been struggling since losing her husband and daughter in a car accident last year. That night at the restaurant was the anniversary. She went there alone, despite my objections. Jake felt a pang of recognition. The sadness in Claire's eyes, it was the same he saw in his own mirror every day. When you saved her, Hayes said, his voice thick with emotion, you did more than just dislodge food from her throat. According to Claire, you reminded her that she still has reasons to live. Jake didn't know how to respond. He thought of Maria, of the promises he'd made to her about living fully even after she was gone, promises he'd struggled to keep. I've done some research on you, Mr. Wilson, Hayes continued. Your construction company is small but has an excellent reputation. You've been facing financial difficulties since your wife's passing, yet you've kept all your employees on payroll, sometimes at personal cost. Jake stiffened. I don't need charity, Mr. Hayes. Hayes smiled. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering opportunity. My company is breaking ground on a new community development next month, affordable housing with green spaces and community facilities. We need a construction partner who understands the value of building not just structures, but homes. Someone with integrity. By the time Jake returned to the house, his mind was spinning. The contract Hayes offered would not only pull his company out of debt but secure their financial future for years to come. It seemed too good to be true. Emma was waiting anxiously. Dad? What happened? Jake explained the situation, watching his daughter's expression shift from excitement to suspicion. So this billionaire just happens to offer you a huge contract because you helped his sister? That's weird, right? She asked. Jake had to admit it did seem strange. Maybe I should call Claire, he suggested. Claire answered on the second ring. Jake, she said, her voice warm. I was hoping to hear from you. Your brother just offered me a life-changing contract, Jake said without preamble. Is this some kind of elaborate thank you? Because if it is. It's not, Claire interrupted. Alex has been looking for a smaller construction company for this project for months. He believes the big corporations have lost touch with what communities really need. When I told him about you, he did his research. The offer is legitimate, Jake. You earned it through years of honest work, not one moment at a restaurant. Jake wanted to believe her, but doubt lingered. Why didn't you tell me who you were? There was a pause before Claire answered. Because for once, someone saw me as just Claire, not as Alexander Hayes' grieving sister. Do you know how rare that is? The following weeks passed in a blur. Jake signed the contract with Hayes Development, hired additional staff, and found himself working closely with both Alexander and Claire, who served as the project's community liaison. The affordable housing development became more than just a job, it became a passion. Emma thrived in the new environment, documenting the construction process with her camera and developing a close bond with Claire, who recognized Maria's old camera and shared Emma's love of photography. As winter turned to spring, Jake realized something had shifted within him. The weight of grief, while still present, had become lighter. He found himself laughing more, especially when Claire was around. Their shared experiences of loss created an understanding that needed no words. One evening, as they reviewed plans in Jake's newly expanded office, Claire looked up suddenly. "Do you ever feel guilty about being happy again?" The question caught Jake off guard with its precision. "All the time," he admitted. "Like I'm betraying Maria's memory somehow." Claire nodded. "I spent a year punishing myself for surviving. For breathing when they couldn't." "What changed?" Jake asked. Claire's eyes met his. "You happened. That night at the restaurant. I wasn't just choking, Jake. Part of me had given up. And then there you were, this stranger refusing to let me go." The air between them changed, charged with something neither was ready to name. The project progressed ahead of schedule. What had begun as a business arrangement evolved into something more meaningful as Jake's construction team worked alongside community members. Alexander Hayes proved to be nothing like the cold businessman portrayed in the media. He was passionate about creating spaces where families could thrive regardless of income. 6 months into the project, disaster struck. Heavy rains caused significant damage to the partially completed structures. Insurance would cover most costs, but the delays threatened the project's viability. Jake found Alexander staring at the damage, his usual confidence shaken. "My board is pushing to cut losses and sell the land," he admitted. "They never believed in this project." "And what do you believe?" Jake asked. Alexander turned to him. "I believe some things are worth fighting for, even when they seem impossible." That night, Jake gathered his team, along with Claire and Alexander. "We can rebuild stronger," he insisted. "And we can do it without extending the timeline." "That's impossible," one of the engineers argued. "We'd need twice the manpower." "Then we'll get it," Jake replied. "Not hired hands, community hands." The plan was audacious: invite future residents and community members to participate in the rebuilding. Those with construction skills could work alongside Jake's team, others could help with logistics, food, childcare for the workers. Claire's eyes shone as she listened. "A community building itself," she said. "It's perfect." Alexander looked skeptical. "My board will never approve paying untrained workers." "We don't pay them," Jake explained. "We create a sweat equity program. Hours worked translate to reduced housing costs or community ownership shares." The idea spread like wildfire. What began as a desperate plan became a movement. Families who had applied for the housing arrived daily to help rebuild. Local businesses donated materials and food. Emma's photographs of the community effort went viral, drawing attention from media outlets across the country. Jake found himself at the center of it all, coordinating teams, solving problems, and watching in amazement as strangers became neighbors before the first family even moved in. Claire worked tirelessly alongside him, her natural ability to connect with people proving invaluable. In quiet moments between tasks, they found themselves sharing stories of their lost loved ones, not with the sharp pain of fresh grief, but with the gentle ache of treasured memories. One evening, as they sat exhausted on the framework of what would become the community center, Claire turned to Jake. "Maria would be proud of you," she said softly. Jake felt tears prick his eyes. "David and Lily would be proud of you too," he replied, naming her husband and daughter for the first time. Claire's hand found his in the gathering darkness. "I think," she said carefully, "they would want us to be happy again." 3 months later, the development was completed ahead of the revised schedule. The grand opening drew crowds from across the state. Alexander Hayes stood before the gathered community, his usual corporate polish replaced by genuine emotion. "This project began as a business venture," he admitted to the crowd. "But it has become something far more valuable. You have created not just buildings, but a true community." As applause erupted, Jake felt Emma slip her hand into his. "Mom would love this," she whispered. Jake nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Across the crowd, his eyes met Claire's, and he saw in them the same mixture of joy and healing that he felt in his own heart. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, Claire found Jake standing alone, watching Emma show her photographs to a group of admiring residents. "So," Claire said, "what happens now?" Jake turned to her. "Now? The families move in. The community grows. Life goes on." Claire smiled. "I meant with us, Jake." The question hung between them, full of possibility and uncertainty. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "I just know that I'm not ready for this to end." Claire's hand found his again. "Neither am I." As the sun set over the new community they had helped create, Jake realized that his life had come full circle. What began with loss had somehow led to new beginnings. The grief would always be part of him, a shadow that sometimes darkened his days, but it no longer defined his future. One simple act at a restaurant had connected two broken people, creating ripples that transformed countless lives. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, real life never is, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a second chance. Emma approached them, camera in hand. "One picture of the heroes who made this happen," she insisted, positioning them against the backdrop of the community they'd built together. As Jake stood beside Claire, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sense that he was exactly where he was meant to be. "Ready?" Emma asked, raising the camera. Jake looked at Claire, at Emma, at the community around them, all the unexpected gifts that had come from one moment of courage. "Ready," he replied, and meant it with his whole heart. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change not just one life, but an entire community. Jake's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, connection and purpose can find us in the most unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Remember, you never know how your actions today might transform someone's tomorrow.